Okay, so we're going to talk about ways to communicate with children and children at different ages. And so there's a handout. Some of the important parts are try to hold the interview with the child in a safe, child-friendly environment. And something not in the handout, but I think is important to remember, is that children are often anxious when they come in to see you folks, even when they come in to see therapists. They don't know what it's about. All they know is they're going into an office, they're meeting with someone that they don't know. So we want to decrease the anxiety that they feel in meeting with us, and and I'm going to give you some tips and some ways we call rapport building, and I'll talk to you about that in just a minute. When you are interviewing a child, especially a school-age child, try to use some open-ended questions, beginning with why or how or what, because those kind of open questions allow a child or an adult to give you more information. So you don't want to ask them something that they will come up with a yes or no answer, unless you need a yes or no answer, because sometimes you do, but for the most part you want open-ended. What happened then? How was that? How did you feel? Why did that occur? Closed questions usually require just a simple yes or no to answer the question. And again, sometimes you need closed questions just because you need some basic information. Or a closed question could be, how old are you? I'm 12. Okay, it's informational. Research has shown that children provide more accurate information when they're freely talking or narrating when they're being asked direct questions. So if you plant some open questions, can you tell me about what do you like to do? What's fun at home? And I'm going to get to some things that you can do in just a minute. You want to consider also when you're talking to children where they are developmentally, based on age, cognitive ability, and culture. Again, some cultures have a sense of we don't share information. It's very, very private, so children are going to hold back. When you talk with children, especially younger ones, ask about one thing at a time. Don't, and I've made the mistake of doing this because I'm talkative, of sometimes asking either a run-on sentence or a run-on question or too many questions. So I've learned to just be quiet. Tell me what happened. And just sit back and let them. Because sometimes they hesitate, especially younger kids, and sometimes they just need to process it themselves, get that picture of what happened. And so move very, very slowly and not throwing a lot of questions out at the kids. When asking about other people, referencing, say, mom, dad, brother, grandmother, try to avoid pronouns such as he, she, that. Ask instead, what happened with mom? What did mom say? What did dad say? What did your grandmother do when that happened? So that way there's no miscommunication. The child knows exactly who you're talking to.
I have to do that with my clients when they're in the office and I'm typing up something and they keep saying he and she and I go, who?
Who? You sound like an owl.
That's not unusual.
If you can, and Sheila, I know you've spoken about this, Carole, you probably do it as well, if you can go into the home to see the child in their own personal, natural environment, it is so helpful. A home visit gives you the opportunity to enter that particular child's world and to learn about the child's home and their play environment. If you can, it's really helpful to have a little rolling suitcase of drawing paper, markers, crayons. If you want to use puppets or games, that may be pushing it too far, but it's a way to go to find out more about them. Years ago I did a fair amount of custody evaluations. My colleague Diana did hundreds, I did less than 100. But one of the things that was so helpful, I would see the children, I would see all the parties, of course, and interview them in my office, but I always made a home visit. And I think it's a kind of a standard part of a custody evaluation, a 7:30 evaluation or other, because it gives you a chance to see their world and what it's like. And I walked into one house once. It smelled so strongly of bleach. and they had white tile, and I guess they had been on their hands and knees scrubbing the grout. I'm thinking, because I always used to say to people, you don't need to do anything special. No, I don't need a meal. Thank you for offering. No, you don't need to clean your house more than you normally do. Just relax. I'm not coming in with a white glove to check and see. So you're in a sense in the same boat, because families often, if they can, if they're cognitively capable and not under the influence of any substance, they want their house to look nice for you. They want it to look pretty.
Can I break in real
Yes,
quickly?
you may.
I'm Carole Adams. This is Carole Bayer. We're doing this together, talking about ages and stages in communication, hearing the voice of the child. Just as a short introduction on that topic, and I don't have that in my notes anywhere. I gave mom and child notice. He was a young teen, maybe 11, 12. I gave them notice I was coming. When I got to the door, it took a minute for them to open the door. And then ahead of me down the hall, the kid was running and picking up bags from McDonald's and Taco Bell on the floor in the hall, all the way down the hall into the family room, all over the place. It was like, I couldn't believe it. They knew I was coming. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. I commented on, I said, did you just clean? And the stay-at-home dad said, he was a stepdad, really good stepdad. He said, I did. I said, do you always clean with bleach? No, only when you're coming over. I said, well, you didn't need to. And I went thinking, I don't know if I can breathe. This is your call. What I think is really helpful is, first of all, after you greet the entire family, if you're there for the child, you want to meet with the child in a room that is separate from the rest of the family. Now, I know we live in an interesting world, and we have to be very cautious and careful, and it'd be interesting to hear how you folks handle it. But I always left so if the child would say, or I'd say, can I see your room? The door was always open. Even if they wanted to talk, we would talk very quietly, and I would say to the parent that was present, please give us the privacy, because anybody can say anything. And I think we have to be a little cautious, even though we're very safe and appropriate people. You may not have that experience, but it's important, because even when CPS goes out, what I have learned from people is that they often question the children in front of the parents. Well, that's not going to help. And so if you want the child to just be comfortable with you, I think you need to talk with them. If it's not 115 degrees out here in the desert, you can go outside and sit with them on a lawn chair.
There's a funny story about having a child show you their bedroom, because Don Griffith was minors counsel on a case, and he went to see a child's room and opened the closet door, and all the kids' clothes were hanging in there. And he said, oh, so these are your clothes in your room? Yeah, my mom just moved him into this room this morning or last night.
Ready for the interview.
Yeah. Or you open the closet and everything comes flying out because they've stuffed all the toys in there.
But he didn't have his own bedroom until the night before that morning.
So basically, I think a lot of it is also reassuring the family when you are coming out. You're not coming out to judge, because if you put yourself in their position, yes, you're a guest in their home. There's already maybe a little attitude or feeling about it being intrusive. So the more you can say, look, I'm just coming to meet with your kids, to meet you, to have some dialogue. And they can give you a tour of the house, which can be helpful, again, depending on what the role is. It leads then into rapport building. And I think this is something that we all can do very, very well. We're all nice people. We all are there for a reason of trying to be helpful and protective. Rapport building, one, helps the child and the family to feel comfortable and relaxed. It's also a time to explain why the interview is taking place. And it could be an example of, I want to learn more about your family, or I want to learn more about you. What I have learned over the years, and I've said this to parents a lot of times, not always in this context, is that children worry more about what they don't know than if you tell them the truth. And so if kids fear, why is this person coming to talk to me? What did I do wrong? And if you assure them from the get-go, and I'm sure that all of you do, it's, I just want to get to know you better. I want to get to know your family a little bit better. And kids will sometimes say, are we in trouble? Did we do something wrong? Well, who sent you here? Especially if this family has had a history of CPS visitations. and especially even if the police have ever been called, if it's been a high conflict, violent situation. So if you tell the child why you're here, that helps to build rapport and it helps to ease their anxiety. Did you want to jump in on that, or you want me to?
No, go ahead.
I have a quick little comment. There
Yeah.
was a movie years ago, 20 plus years ago, I believe it was called The Client. And the kid hires a lawyer, and he had some it wasn't a divorce case, but it's the concept. So the kid hires a lawyer, and the lawyer says, my fee's $1. So the kid says, well, I've got, okay, well, you pay 20 cents a week, that's fine. So in the beginning of my minors counsel cases, or in some of them, I'll tell the kids when I meet them for the first time, do you know who I am? I'm a lawyer, I'm your lawyer, and my fee's $1. So, you want to make payments, or can you give me the $1 too? And they crack up.
Do you really
I
accept it?
represent you. No, but they don't usually have it. But I'll just say that I represent you, and so here's my card and my numbers and my cell.
Yeah.
But it kind of just broke the ice
It
in a few of
does.
my cases, and they were going, oh, I got a lawyer. Okay, now I know where you're here. I represent you, dude. You're my client. It's us.
And I always say that at the beginning. The first time I meet my kids, I always say, do you know what a lawyer is? Do you know what court is? I explain that. And then I always tell them, I'm yours. I'm not your mom's.
Right.
I'm not your dad's. I'm only yours. If you have a sister, is it okay if I'm hers too? Because sometimes you two want to talk and all three of us might want to talk. But I always let these kids know I am theirs alone, not mom's and not dad's, and I'm going to talk for them in court. And I'm going to see how things go. I'm going to want to know what they like, what they don't like, and maybe my recommendation to the court may not be exactly what they tell me they want, because I have to look at the whole, and I explain all this at the beginning, the whole picture to see what's best. So my very first meeting with kids is always that introduction, and I'm yours. I also have a great big bin of stuffed animals out there, and every kid gets one. They get to
Nice.
pick their very own. They can bring it in and
Nice.
hang on to it while we're talking,
nice.
but they usually get it on the way out, and they just. I've had parents tell me they've slept with that
That's
thing, every night since
took
they
it to
got
college
it.
with
Oh
them.
yeah.
No, that's wonderful.
The other point I wanted to make on that was that I also tell kids about lawyer-client confidentiality. And while obviously there are lots of things that I do repeat to parents, lawyers, judges, I want them to have that feeling of, we have this private conversation. I think that would open the door a little bit more to them being more candid with me and opening up, maybe not the initial meeting, but ultimately they need to know that. So I think that's
And we'll get to Minors Council report probably at another hour, but I always put that in my Minors Council report. The child wanted me to tell the court, da-da-da-da-da, or the child did not want
Right.
their statements
Exactly.
disclosed. Okay, back to you.
All right. So what I think is one way to really connect with kids, and this would be from elementary school aged all the way up through high school, is to ask them what they like. What do they enjoy doing? What do they like to do with their friends? Do they have any pets? What video games do they like? Now, I have no idea about any of these video games, but I act like I do. And they go, well, I play video games. You wouldn't know them. I said, will you play Fortnite? Have you played Fortnite? I said, well, not yet, but I probably will. Have you played, Call of Duty? No, is that a little violent? Yeah, but it's only a game. It's okay. It's bloody, but it's okay. You wouldn't be afraid. So we now bond over a video game that I've never looked at, that I couldn't possibly run in my entire life. I ask them, the kids that are in middle school and even high school, what bands do you like? Now, I have no idea, other than Taylor Swift, because she dates Travis Kelce, who any of these people are. But when they start throwing out all these names, I go, oh, what kind of music is that? Oh, well, it's really cool music. I said, do you know any of their songs? So, what's fun is we all have a personality, and we don't have to keep it hidden. And this isn't a stand-up comedy that we're being silly, but if you allow that part of you, and I know everybody here does and can, to come out and connect with the children, guess what you have now done? Their anxiety has gone down. They feel safe. They feel a connection, and they like you. And in therapy, I've had kids come in, like a 12-year-old boy who does not want to be there because his parents say, your behavior is terrible, you have to stop. And they just sit there and they glower at me. And I'll sometimes say to them, well, tell me about yourself. And they do. And I say, so are you married yet? And they go, what? How many kids do you have? What? I said, I'm just teasing. am I trying to be really that funny? Not necessarily, but because I want them to be relaxed. And guess what? Then when we finish, and they did not want to come in that day, not every kid, I don't have success with all of them, but by the end of the session, I go, so what do you think? Is it worth coming back? And I'll let it be their decision for a moment. And most will say, yeah, you're cool, you're okay. I go, great. Tell me how I can continue to be cool. So you connect and you bond with them over the world that they know. And it's also part of rapport building, is not being blown over and falling out of your chair when these teenagers, especially teenagers, or even some preteens, tell you things that you go, oh my gosh, I am so overwhelmed by what you're telling me. Or the 12-year-old that tells you that she's posting nude videos. You know, we'll get to that stuff, but you know, on social media, and so trying not to end the session with, oh, I have to go tell your parents, is to sit back and say, when you hear negative things, or that they're vaping, or that they're, you know, going into the bathroom. I had some kids tell me, well, you can go into the bathroom at school and you can smoke, and these are middle school kids, because there's no cameras in the bathroom.
Yeah.
I said, what if there were cameras? Well, I wouldn't do it in there. I said, okay. I said, you're sure there's no cameras? Well, there's not going to be cameras in the bathroom. I said, probably not. So let's talk a little bit about why you vape. But I don't go run, you know, you have to judge in terms of confidentiality, what you tell, what you don't, but we'll get to that after a while. But the bottom line is most kids are not going to tell you life-threatening and life-shattering issues. Let them know let them know the ground rules. What information is confidential and what isn't. And I know our rules are a little bit different. Kids worry a lot that the interviewer is going to go out and tell their parents everything. And in my informed consent, when it comes to, I have a whole section on minors and confidentiality. And from my very first visit with the family, I have parents come in with their child, even if they're 17 and a half, initially, and then the parents can step out, is I let them know that everything your child tells me I am bound to keep private. However, and I say it in front of the kids, there's exceptions. Do you guys know what exceptions means if they're young kids? It means if I'm worried about you, if you're doing something dangerous, if you're being harmed by someone, if you're threatening to hurt someone else or yourself, I can't keep that private. I don't call the police right away. I come out and we bring your parents in. My job is to help keep you safe. But everything else you tell me about your feelings, about who makes you mad, and I say to the parents, even certain behaviors that we as parents might not like, as long as it's not harming your child. Now, that's a slippery slope, but as long as your child's not in danger, I have to keep it private. Question often comes up, and again, I don't know if this impacts your work. If the child tells me that they're buying weed at school and going home and smoking it before mom and dad gets home from work, do I tell? I give them a big long lecture about what they're doing, why they're doing it, how dangerous it is, how do they know what they're really buying, what if it kills them, what if it's laced with fentanyl or something else, they could die. I tried to find the balance between not betraying the client, because then they'll never tell me anything again, but yet making sure I have an obligation to make sure that this child is safe. I've taken that on. So sometimes you just have to use what we call clinical judgment, which is your attorney judgment. It is clinical judgment. Is this something I need to caution the parents about? I had I think it was a case that I had, it was a long case that I had with you all along. We've had many. A boy who was going from biological father to mother and stepdad, and
I've had so many of
You've
those, I
had so
wouldn't
many.
know.
Okay. And he was a bit acting out, and the stepdad and the biological mom were pretty permissive. I don't think dad was as much, but anyway, he went back and forth. He comes in one day and he has his phone, and I had a different office, so there was a separate play therapy room, and he liked the room, and he would use the play therapy items a lot, sand tray, etc. And he walks in with the phone. I said, would you do me a favor? I won't say his name. I said, would you turn off your phone or give it to mom to hold while we're in here? Yeah, but I want to show you something. I said, okay, we'll take 1 minute, because kids want power and a little control. I said, 1 minute and you can show me what you want to show me. What do you want to show me? He said, I want to show you pornography. So I looked at him and I said, how old are you? And I knew. I think he said 10 at the time. I said, and what are you doing looking at pornography? He said, well, it's natural. That's how babies are made. I said, no, that's not what pornography is. Now, I mean, I don't care what people do in their own homes, and but I do care what 10-year-olds are exposed to. So I said, remember how when we first met I told you there were things that I would keep private and things that I wouldn't? Do your mom or dad or stepdad or your dad, do they know what you're looking at? No. I said, but you have unlimited access to this phone? Well, yeah, it's no big deal. And I said, this is one of those things that's dangerous for you, so I have to talk to mom and dad about it. And they kind of was like, well, boys will be boys, but I gave them the lecture that
I was on a minors council case many, many, many years ago where a 730 had been done like 5 years before I came on the case. And the 730 evaluation said Dad had a personality disorder, he shouldn't have custody of the kids. So here 5 years later, he has custody of 2 teenage girls. And I found in the case he was sexting his daughter.
Yeah.
And maybe not directly, but he allowed her to see all of his messages to his girlfriends, and he left all kinds of stuff around the house when he brought women over for this teenager to grow up with. I mean, talk about abuse. And the older teen was like 17 and a half, and she left and wouldn't come back. But the 15-year-old was stuck there until I came on the case and took this to the judge, and the judge was like, how did we miss this 5 years ago? I don't know how they missed it 5 years before, but this kid was immediately removed from Dad's house, and he was irate. A few years ago, I got an email from him like, you just destroyed my life with my daughter. I don't see her anymore. And it's like, I really wanted to say, good.
And
but I
who
didn't.
caused that? Not you.
Out of the blue. I mean, that text, that email came.
Yeah.
And they were in Mom's home, they were a very conservative Mormon family. So it was shocking, very, very shocking to find out what was going on in Dad's home. And so sometimes when we're minors counsel for teenagers, things just sort of slip out, like she didn't say, here, look at my phone. It just sort of came out, during our meetings. So all kinds of stuff. We'll talk about working with teens too as we get a little bit farther, but the phone thing is, the pictures on the phones, I didn't see any of the pictures, but I heard all about them. Anyway, go ahead.
So with younger kids, because you sort of want to understand it, do they know the truth from a lie? So if they're going to tell you something, so we all have our own little ways of doing it. With young kids, especially maybe 3, not so much 3, but maybe 4, 5, 6, I'll say to them, so when we talk about things and if I ask you something, can you tell me something that you really believe to be true? So do you know the difference between something that's true and that's, I usually say not true. I don't like to use the word lie too much. And then they go, well, yeah. I say, okay, so if I said I'm an old man with a long beard, would that be true or false? And they look at me and they go, that's false. If I said, well, there's a giraffe in my waiting room, would that be true or false? And they look and go, but again, it's part of rapport building also, because they now see how silly it is. But I said, well, that would be false. And then I can try to make it some additional questions that are a little bit closer to their reality. And that way you get a sense of do they understand that what they're telling you is so and what is not so. There's some cool activities, and I'm so sorry, I meant to bring, I don't know if we would have had time and if it would have worked in this presentation, but there's a wonderful little exercise. It was by Winnicott, and it's about play therapy, and I call it Draw Yourself. And you take a piece of paper, and you give the child, a marker works great, a thin marker, and you ask them to make a squiggle. And you can say to them, if they're a little bit older, and because this works for any age, even adults, you can say to them, make a squiggle. Remember when you were in kindergarten and all you knew how to do was just make a squiggle on the whiteboard? Yes. Okay. Would you do that on this piece of paper? Or you can have a little whiteboard, it doesn't matter. And once you put the marker down, don't change it. Just make a big squiggle, as big as you want or as little as you want. And okay, they do that. Then You start to ask them questions, and 99% of the time it works. So you turn it around, you look at it, you can say, do you see an animal, some kind of an animal or a reptile in this picture? And they'll see a bird, they'll see a giraffe, they'll see a snake very often. No Freudian piece here. They'll see all kinds of, some kind of an animal, maybe a whale because they've drawn something big. And then you can say, oh, okay, yeah, I see it. And then you take a different marker and you color over, or you have them do it over the animal or whatever they've identified. Then you start asking them, so is that a boy snake? Let's say, is that a boy snake or a girl snake? It's a girl snake. Okay. Who does the snake live with? Or it can be a whale. Who does the whale live with? Lives by itself. Okay. Does it have a family? Yeah, but the family went away a long time ago. So all of a sudden, little doors are opening. How does it feel being away from its family? It's sad. What does it do when it's sad? So what you're doing now is all the questions that you could ask this child, what they're doing is they're projecting it out onto something else. And so it feels much safer. So if I asked one of you as adults to come and make a sand tray story, and I said, you can pick from any of the baskets, there's hundreds of items, you can make a story, you don't even need words. It taps into, amazingly, the subconscious, and you would make something that's relevant to you. Sheila's story would be different than Carole's story, it would be different from Jennifer's story, or my story, or David's or Michael's. It would be our story. We probably wouldn't even have a plan, it just plays out. So the squiggle is a wonderful tool. And even high school kids, they look at you and they'll roll their eyes and go, oh, I don't know why I have to do this. You don't have to. Just try it. Have some fun. And then as the story evolves, I've had stories that have gone on into a half hour of them telling me all about this whale that is searching for its family, that wants to be, but it's not with its family because the whale dad and the whale mom used to fight. And it doesn't have to be realistic, because it's not. And how that they feel they really miss that whale dad. And so what does the baby whale want to do? And you get so much from it. It's a wonderful tool.
I have to ask you real
Yes,
quickly,
yes.
do you still have your sand tray?
I do.
Because you haven't mentioned it yet today until just now.
Oh, okay.
But I did see it in your office one time, and
Yeah.
I saw kids actually playing it. I think it's a great idea.
The sand tray, there's lots of uses for it. The sand I have is bright orange sand that comes from Utah. My husband always teases me because I spend quite a bit of money to get that sand shipped. It's so fine, it feels like silk. And of course, he's logical. He'll say, but we live in the desert. We can get sand wherever we want to go. No, this sand. And it's cleaned and before they send it. And I can take it out of the sand tray box and bring it home and wash it if I need to, but I don't always. Sometimes I'd have to add more. And the idea is that it's very tactile, so it's relaxing. And many times when I have kids come in, I use it as a vehicle for communication. There's deeper ways. Jung used to use it that everything had a subconscious meaning. I'm not that smart. I don't know what that is. So I just they tell a story. But one of the most interesting, I had two really interesting ones. Two little girls that were living with grandparents. And there had been some belief that they had been sexually abused, but no disclosure, nothing came out, no evidence, no forensic evidence. And I like it when I have a separate play therapy room. Where I am now, it's just a separate section because I have a new office. But what the kids did, and right at the end, of course the biggest information comes out at the end of a session when it's the safest, even with kids, because then they know they don't really have to talk about it. So I come over and I look at the sand tray box. They have now left to go out to the grandparents, and we're going to go home. And I see, I have the anatomically correct dolls. I have never used them. $500 down the drain, but I've never needed to use them because Barbie and Ken, even before the movie came out, I never saw it. Even with Barbie and Ken and some of the little dolls, they replicate behaviors. And so there was a very, very suggestive type of behavior being shown in the sand tray with beds and couches and Ken and Barbie. Poor Ken and Barbie. Or maybe not. And so they left, and I saw this, and at the time I don't even think I had a cell phone at the time. I had a Polaroid camera, and I took some pictures. Next time they came in, and I then put it away, because you don't want that story to influence the next child, no matter what the story is. And I asked the kids about it. I said, I'm really curious. I said, could you tell me more about what you made? I noticed that, real, not too suggestive. And they said, oh, well, we didn't want you to know. I said, well, can you tell me what's going on? And then they did, and yes, I think it was step-grandpa had been molesting them for a very long time. And I said, I am proud of you for telling me, and I'm kind of honored that you trust me with this information. And I had already told them earlier, and I said, this is not okay, and I said, we have to do something about it to keep you safe. But thank you for telling me, and that was their way. I had another kid recently, and I have a little container full of teeny little miniature alcohol bottles and beer cans. And the kids that have no alcohol problems in the home tell me it's bottles of Coke or it's, cans of Coca-Cola. The kids that are exposed to alcohol in their home, they know exactly what it is. That's a whiskey bottle. That's Coors. That's whatever. And I had a child who couldn't talk to me about family, and mom had a severe alcohol abuse problem, dependency and abuse problem. And so he played out. He had a couch. He took one of the female figures, which was, I have many different sizes, was about this big, put it on the couch, took all of the alcohol containers, there's probably about 12, 15 maybe, poured them all over the mom on the couch.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, and I always play dumb, which is very helpful to play dumb. Sometimes it really works. And I said, tell me about this. What's going on here? Well, what do you think? I don't know. Is that like a blanket of cans? And they roll their eyes like I'm really stupid. I said, well, tell me what's going on. There's something about this you want me to know. Well, when I come home, this is how I find my mom.
Yeah.
Never had it come up. The other parent didn't bring it up. So yeah, Sandtray it's a vehicle, as is our pictures. I have a big dollhouse. No, it's not a Barbie dream house. I wouldn't go there. It's a big house. I just call it a house rather than a dollhouse per se for boys and girls. And I asked them, can you show me a little bit what it's like? And I have kids that have chaotic environments, like a lot of the families we see, that there's a two-story, so there's a ladder from the ground floor to the second floor on both sides. There's there's the beds, there's the toilet, there's the normal things, furniture you'd find in a house, and more to choose from. Kids in chaos, they make the house chaotic.
Mm.
Yeah.
They take down the ladders, they turn the TVs upside down, they have the beds upside down, they bring in everything from the little containers that I have practically and put it in the house where it's jammed full. And so, part of me is thinking, wow, I'm the one that has to clean this up, because I do the cleanup. And there's a therapeutic reason for that, and I'll tell you that in a minute. I'm thinking, darn, I don't have time to clean this up before the next kid. But the real me, who's therapeutic, says, there's a lot going on there. Can you tell me what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Well, everybody's mad. And then they start again. And, I know everyone's mad. I can see the house. There's everything upside down. I don't say that to them. Well, tell me what happens. Where are you when this happens? And so again, it's a vehicle. Play therapy is so wonderful. There's a fabulous woman. I don't know her personally, although I did meet her a couple times when she presented, named Eliana Gill, G-I-L. And she actually was one of the authors of the Child Abuse Handbook. So you'll come across her name in the California Handbook for Mandated Reporters and Child Abuse Treatment. Very well thought of. Wonderful lady, and she just does some magnificent play therapy work. A lot of, I don't know if I borrowed it from her, or if it's just partly my style as well, but a lot of just fact-finding, warm, comfortable. I noticed that. What's going on here? I see where you put, I see you put the water bottle there. Why do you think you didn't put it there? So, it's just really open questions. So it's wonderful. So
Let me ask you a
yeah.
question about that.
Sure.
We have to talk a little bit about ages and stages.
Yes, ma'am.
What ages do you use this play therapy for in your sandbox?
Ideally, usually under 12, but sometimes
12,
with kids
wow.
that are a little, even up to 12.
Wow.
So once they're kind of at the end of middle school, they're too cool for school, and so they sort of don't want to. But I will sometimes say, I have a lot of young kids that I work with, teenagers, and I have even some adults that like it. Would you just like to see it? And they shrug, and I said, let me just, and it has a lid to keep it clean, and the lid also serves as, it makes it like a desk, so we can use it for drawing. Take the lid off, and they go, oh, well, that's cool, where's that from? And go, guess what state I get this from? I don't know, California? Guess, starts with a U. Utah? Yeah, I have it shipped here. How come? It's the red rocks, it's the sand from the red rocks of southern Utah. Oh, northern Arizona. Oh, and well, why do you have this? And then I explained, well, sometimes it's a way to just, I said, feel it. Oh, it's really soft. So probably up to about middle school age. The high schoolers do kind of roll their eyes and think that it's dumb. Once in a while they will.
What's the size of this?
It's a standard, and believe it or not, it's a standard size, although if someone says, I want to make one at home, they don't have to. It's about like this to about that deep, and I have it on a pedestal stand, so it rolls, we can move it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
To your point on the bottles that you used for the alcohol and drugs years ago, I've been here 25 years, so before I moved here as a lawyer, a case involving alcohol consumption by the dad, who denied it, and I was in front of a judge, and the witness was the kid who observed the dad drinking. Big custody case. So what I did was, I don't know where I get these creative ideas. I go to the store and I buy Martinelli's sparkling apple cider, which is what Dad said he had, champagne, and 3 or 4 other bottles, and I put them up on the place where the kid is sitting on the witness stand. This is actually in court. And can you pick out the one your daddy was drinking? Definitely champagne. It was not Martinelli's. And of course, Dad was telling the story, and here's this kid. So it reminded me of the box where, you know, and he's in court. I mean, this is an actual court appearance where this 4 or 5 or 6-year-old kid is like, nope, I know the label on the bottle. I mean, I guess the dad drank so much that it was a very common bottle for him, and he picked the right one, and Dad lost everything that day.
And kids will know if you know, and again, I'm not looking to knock everybody out, but kids will know, and if they say, well, it says, well, he drinks beer, I say, well, how do you know it's beer and not root beer?
Right.
And they look at you like, again, like you're a little bit stupid, because it says beer, it says Coors. I said,
It says Coors.
I said Coors, so it's not Coors root beer? No. And so, you know, because, and again, do we make a CPS report on that? Well, not necessarily, because people are allowed to drink, they're even allowed to smoke, you know, weed if they want to. But I look at the safety piece, so.
I had a case similar to that. One of the parents was a really bad alcoholic, really bad drug addict. And I recommended that they live with Dad, and our judge at the time said, I'm leaving them half time with Mom and half time with Dad. Oldest child is 15. She can get out and get help if she needs it. She knows when Mom's passed out, and maybe she can even save Mom's life. And that's why he left the kids with Mom, because he didn't see any
Major
danger to the children leaving them with somebody that was passed out half of every day.
Really.
Yeah.
One of the questions that I often ask parents, I have a wonderful lady, and I'll be very cautious here because she might be known, not to this little group, but she's had a problem for 20 plus years with alcohol consumption, and fortunately the dad who did, they're together, he's been totally sober all this time. So then they separated for a while, and the child was going back and forth, and Dad called the mom on. The child was with Dad for that particular week, and Dad, apparently Mom told me this, called Mom and said, I think he had a really bad abdominal pain. I'm going to take him to the ER. Meet us there. She said, I can't. He said, what do you mean you can't? I've had too much to drink. So one of my questions when I talk with parents who use any kind of a substance, number one, do you use it around your children? Don't. Do what you're going to do. You can. It's your life, but don't do it around the kids. Second question is, do you ever get in the vehicle by yourself or with others? No. So sometimes I'm driving home from the bar. I said, then you're possibly putting your children at risk of not having a parent, because you could be arrested, you could be killed. You're also putting me at risk. Well, what do you mean? Do you have to report? I said, no. I drive on those streets. I don't care what you drink. You're entitled to. I'm not judging that. Don't get in your car when you've been drinking. Drink at home, or wait till you get home. So one of my other questions to parents who have younger kids who can't fend for themselves is, when they say, well, I only drink when the kids go to sleep. I said, okay, so what happens if we have a major earthquake where you really have to grab your child and seek safety? Could you? Well, I think so. What happens if your child wakes up with an appendicitis, or seems to have that, or they can't breathe, or they're having an asthma attack, or something, or they fall out of bed and get hurt? Can you get them to the ER? Just think about that. Well, that's probably not going to happen. How do you know? So it's not like I'm the moral majority. I'm not. But we try to enlighten. So the draw yourself with the squiggle is just a wonderful, wonderful tool. It works so well. There's other play therapy techniques, and they're not unique to just our work. But again, if you could draw a house, and there is a psychological test for it's called House Tree Person. I'm not trained. At one point I learned it a bit, but I'm not trained to do that. Each thing represents some part of their life. But more importantly, it's a vehicle. So if you say, could you draw a house for me? And could you show me the people that live in that house? And they do. And you can also look, will you show me all the people that are in that house? One of the things you can note is, let's say there's a mom, a dad, and 2 kids. Where's the placement of the people? Where are the kids closer to mom, or are they closer to dad? Again, it's not that we're doing a big, deep psychological evaluation, but it's information. So if the kids are closer over with mom, again, you can do I noticed that the kids, instead of saying you, make it a third person. I noticed that the children in this picture, even though you've told them to draw their own family, are standing over by the mom. Well, I'm curious why they're not near the dad. Well, mom is soft and she's nice. Oh, and then again, the door's open and you can start asking all kinds of questions. Tell me about what would make it easier to stand over. For these children, again, it's third person, these children stand by dad. Well, if he didn't get mad, if he didn't look so serious, if he was nicer. And again, so you're opening all kinds of doors to learning about them, and it's kind of tricky sometimes. One other thing I do that's a little tricky with younger kids is when they say, well, I'm not supposed to tell. Can you tell me what you're not supposed to tell? And guess what?
They tell you.
They do. Because I'm not using it for wrong reasons.
Let me just tell you one thing about
Sure.
the photos, the pictures. I used to, much more than I do now, have kids draw pictures for me and color them. I have crayons and I have colored pencils and all that kind of stuff. And I remember one little girl, and it's been so long ago, maybe 15 years ago, but she drew me some pictures while she was here that I learned from. And then she started bringing pictures back to me and leaving them for me at the office. Do you remember that? She would bring her dad or somebody would bring 2 or 3 pictures from her, and it happened week after week after week for probably about 6 or 8 weeks. And she just wanted me to have her artwork, and I thought that was kind of cool.
And a lot of times kids want to see it up on the wall.
It was on my wall.
Okay.
It was on my door.
The only thing that I do is I make sure that I try not to have the child put their name on the front. I tell, let's put your name on the back for obvious reasons, confidentiality, especially if their name isn't, if it's
Right.
a standard name, maybe not so much, but even then, and I don't have them put their last name. Well, what about my last name? Then let's put it on the back. And then nobody can say, and they say, well, why not? I don't care. I know, but I care because this is when we go
And
back.
I won't forget, so I don't need it on there.
So as you build rapport, and it could be a whole session, it could be 10 minutes. You'll know because the child will be more responsive to you. Then start to work towards topics that are much more important to address, from domestic violence to their worries, their fears, possible abuse. How they get along, how they get along in the home, how they get along at dad's house, mom's house, whatever might be going on. You can also, when children are giving you a narrative of what happens, and sometimes you'll notice with younger children, it's almost like they're looking up into the top of their head when and those of you that have raised children know this, or if you've worked with kids, they'll be talking, well, maybe, and it's like, okay, we only have an hour, come on. But you don't say that, of course, but they need to tell it in their way. The other thing is, I have a friend who is an absolute perfectionist when it comes to language. And she's always correcting people. She's a nurse. She can do that. She will say to me, well, if someone tells, if they use the wrong tense, or even an adult, if their grammar isn't appropriate, don't you correct them and go, how would you feel if a therapist did that to you?
Mm.
I let it go. I'm not their teacher.
Exactly.
I may not even know, but no. And with kids, I never do that because they are going to, I'm trying to think of some examples. They'll make it a past tense, but they don't use it correctly, or they will use the future in a way that is not appropriate. Again, I'm not a linguist, but or an English teacher. I don't correct them. I would only ask clarifying questions if I don't understand. So, and we'll talk about that, and probably you will too when we get to absolute questioning of children. Work towards, from their narrative, to more focused questions to get more clarifications. One of the things that you can also do, and again, it kind of goes back to a little bit of drawing, you can even do just a piece of paper with stick figures on it, make it simple. And you can say, well, you're talking about when this happens. Can you show it to me? Can you draw a picture of what happens? And again, that provides a lot more clarification. It also gives you something to work with. And you can say to them, do you mind if I keep this? And if they want to take it home with them, you can make a photocopy and give them either one. Be careful not, mirroring the child's wording. So mirroring, obviously, you probably know, it involves restating what the child said to get confirmation. So what you're telling me, Sheila, is that you have solar panels on your roof, and it's really helping with the electric bill. Is that correct? Yes, Carole, that's correct. So that's because we just were talking about it out there. With kids, a lot of mirroring. So if I understand right, what you're saying is, and it feels like it's crazy kind of language, but it's very good for clarifying and getting the information. So what you're saying is that when mom gets in the car, she puts a bottle of a can of Coors in the cup holder. Does she drink from that? Well, yeah, because she's thirsty. Okay, and so what you're saying is that when mom, so I may repeat it 2 or 3 times, and for you folks probably even more because you do reports. I mean, I would do a report if appropriate. So that's real helpful, the mirroring and the restating. Be careful that you don't use anything in your questioning that's suggestive. So, and that I think for a lot of therapists in the very beginning that are interviewing kids, sometimes they make that mistake. Assigning a certain role based on their own experiences, because we're human too. We have to be really careful of that. When you end the interview...
Let me just tell you one
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
One time I put a therapist from Barbara Sinatra Center on the stand, and I asked how they asked questions of the child. Every single question was a leading question.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
That surprises me.
Yeah.
Huh.
And the Big Martin case, I mean, that was a huge case
Oh, yeah.
30 years
Yeah,
ago,
I
where
remember
the whole
that.
questioning process, there's a therapist, PhD, I don't know if you know her, I've known her for years, Martha Rogers.
Yeah.
And she was from Orange County, and she wrote the book on how to interview kids
Oh,
when there are issues related to sexual abuse. She was the specialist in the county, and she wrote a whole book on the techniques and not asking leading questions and how you do all of these things, because that case ultimately got, they
Got
all
thrown
got
out,
off
yeah.
because of the techniques that
Mm-hmm.
what they called at the time untrained professionals asked. And all of us are possibly capable of that,
Yeah.
and you're right, you have to let them say the story, not put it in their mouth.
Yeah.
What is that called now, though? The formalized structures of the MCAT, or is that a Riverside County thing?
I don't know. I haven't worked with her in probably 10 years, but I can get the information if you want it.
based on what I know of the MCAT, and when they do forensic interviewing only one time for the child, and so
Right.
like at Sinatra, I think that's the facility they use.
Right.
They'll have various people there. They'll have probably law enforcement. They'll have
Social worker.
the social workers.
Mental health
It'll be a
professional.
social worker. They'll have the therapist for that. It may not be the child's therapist, but the therapist will ask a lot of questions. And so the idea is that you expose the child to less trauma by only asking one time.
And it should be video recorded,
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Of
And then they
course.
have the.
And you want to hear something interesting about that? I had a case where mother had daughter say dad had sexually molested her. Well, the story changed so many times. I don't know if you knew about this case or not, but the story changed so many times. Well, it happened in this room, it happened
Yes.
in this room, it happened in this room.
Yes.
They did an MCAT. They agreed Dad had sexually molested. Sent it to the police, and I'm not sure what they came back with. I think unfounded from the police. CPS founded. Dad said, "Nobody ever spoke to me. I have cameras all over my house." Had this child gone from this bedroom to this bedroom, or had gone from this bedroom to this bedroom, it would have been on camera. And ultimately, it came back that even the MCAT was wrong, and another CPS interview was so leading, it was unbelievable. I actually had them do that in my office, and I sat and listened while they talked to my client. Unbelievable. Because they had no idea how to interview him. None. And I know you want to say something, but I just want to say, you need to be very, very, very careful how you question somebody. And the only reason that it's very interesting how that case came back ruled against Mom is Judge Cho questioned the child in her courtroom, found the child was lying all over the place. And
Was the child a girl?
Yeah.
I know the case, yeah.
And what did Dad do to sexually molest you? Well, he touched my tummy. Well, where did he touch your tummy? Right below my belt. He was rubbing my tummy. That was it. In court, that's what she said. And yet Mother still is making reports to the police that Dad's sexually molested, even though we've been through everything. And everybody interviewed this child. I mean, I didn't because I'm Dad's attorney, but interviewing a child is so very, very important. Mike, do you want to ask something?
Well, I was just I've got two 3118s right now going. One is the similar type what you're describing, where the report indicates the child's all over the place with these, probably been interviewed three, four times, and the story grows, it changes, it expands, and then I've got another one where my other 3118, where the report indicates the child basically clamps down totally. So I've kind of got these two interesting, from this perspective, cases that have kind of diametrically different type of report outcomes, and they're still in the mid 3118. But in both cases, I'm trying to get the damn video of the MCAT, and when I deal with Frank's and the Barbara Sinatra Center, they're like, we keep no records. There's nobody here. We don't know who has the video. I request it from law enforcement, CPS. Everyone's like, no. I want to get this. I want to get a hold of this video because I want to see exactly what was asked and whatnot. But anyway, I guess my point as it relates to the minors council or this type of context is
I will tell you, if you really get a good rapport with your kid, they're going to be more open with you than they are ever with CPS, ever.
And sometimes it takes a little time. I think it's this same case, but there could be others that are very similar, but the girl, and this is where I did a lot of the mirroring and the clarifying, because she came in to me initially and she said, I don't want to be at my dad's house because he molested me, or he touched me. I said, oh, okay, well, tell me what happened. I don't react. I don't get, oh my God, really? Because that would be, first of all, totally inappropriate, although sometimes you'll have therapists who are new and they've not done this before, and they're going from their own perspective. Yeah, we don't want anyone to touch anybody inappropriately, and so they do project some of their own stuff. So I said, okay. I said, well, tell me what happened. Well, he came to my bed and went to wake me, and then he hugged me, and I think his hand touched my belly, and I think it might be the same case. I don't remember. And I said, so did anything else happen? No. I said, but that felt like it was sexual abuse or inappropriate. Well, yeah. Next time she comes in, she's back with Mom. She isn't with Dad. She said, well, I know he molested me because he put his hand in my privates. I said, he did. When did that happen? Can you? I'm having trouble remembering. No, I remember really well, and probably you guys do too. I said, I'm having trouble remembering what you told me the first time. She says, well, he came into my room and he climbed into bed with me. I said, oh. I said, I don't remember that part. Am I wrong? Well, yeah, you're wrong. Okay. So next time, same thing. So he molested me. I'm afraid to go with him. I don't want to be with him. He's a bad person. Tell me what happened. Well, he took me in his bed. and he was rubbing my privates. I said, oh. I said, that must have been really scary for you. Yeah. I said, I'm trying to remember. Can you help me remember? Again, playing really stupid, and it works sometimes. I said, so the first thing I think you told me a few weeks ago was that he came to your bed and then he hugged you and his hand brushed the front of you. Oh, well, yeah, but then he took me in his bedroom afterwards. I said, okay. Same. This went on for weeks. Next time was not only did he molest her, but his live-in girlfriend, and they were engaged, which that's not the issue. His live-in girlfriend got in the bed too, and she molested her.
Oh.
And I said, you know, I don't remember any of that. I said, so let's go back to my notes, and I'm thumbing through whether they're in there or not. I said, oh, I think the first time you told me this is what happened in this room. And so I did a letter, maybe it doesn't say, I did a letter based on each situation changed. I don't think it was that long ago, within the last 2 years probably. That situation changed, that I did not, usually I believe kids, but I did not in this case, because she was a teenager. The kids that, I don't want to go backwards, but the kids that usually, if someone is going to be fabricating, example, lie, it's usually not the little kids. It's usually the teenagers that have a vested interest in not being at that parent's house.
Yeah.
Why? It's more fun at mom's. I get to stay up until 2 in the morning. I get to have my devices. Dad turns off the Wi-Fi at 10 o'clock. Dad doesn't let me climb out my window and go to the park, and I'm 14 and meet my friends and buy weed. Oh, well, of course you'd rather be at the other. So I felt I was going out on a limb a little bit, because we often do,
Sure.
in writing this letter, because I was allowed to write the letter back, that I did not think that it was accurate. I was careful with my wording, because I'm not in the room, I'm not in the house, so.
Carole,
Okay, let me just ask a question here. We're at 1 hour. Do you want to take a 5-minute break before we go on for another 50 minutes, or do you want to go straight through?
Straight through.
We can go
Okay,
straight
are you
through.
guys
good.
okay with
Yeah.
that? You okay with that? Okay, you want to have a question?
Yeah, I just, in my experience in dealing with the few experiences I had that or cases that involve sexual abuse allegations of a child, I've come to the conclusion that I will never lead out as the attorney representing a parent. I've come to the conclusion that I am going to sit there and let law enforcement and CPS do their investigation, period, end of story, and only ride their coattails if they find something substantiated. Because the couple of situations where I did the opposite blew up in my face and my client's face very badly, very quickly.
It's so hard. It's so hard.
Do you think that is one, probably the right approach as minors counsel? I mean, make your reports if you have a concern. Maybe do you even there's confidentiality issue, but and I haven't had it come up in this context. How would you approach if you're the first person hearing about it, or one of the parents is telling you about it as minors counsel? I mean, do you think that you think that the role that you need to make the court? I mean, of course, make the court aware. Do you think you need to lead out aggressively in it, or
Okay,
do
well,
you
let me
sit
just
behind?
answer that real quickly,
Go, knock out
because
from the same tree.
I was telling you about this case where I had the 3 kids, and the son didn't want to go with dad.
Mhm.
The 2 girls, one of them said she had been sexually molested by the new husband of mom.
Right.
CPS in El Centro made it unfounded because it allegedly happened to her older sister in Mexico. So that kind of was a mush, and it said it didn't say unsubstantiated, it said inconclusive regarding this child, because there were 2 kids that it allegedly happened to. And CPS did a report here. It came back the same day I was in court last time. It said the children could be safely maintained in mother's home, despite the fact that one of the kids said something had happened, but that was the older daughter. They never went to When they went to the school to talk to the two girls that I'm minors counsel for, they asked if there was enough food in the home. They asked enough if they had any bruises, and they asked if they knew what drugs were. They never asked about this stepdad. Never mentioned him to these girls. I put that in my minors counsel report. I also talked about the son who was still not going, but that was a separate issue, alienation. But I don't find, unfortunately, in the last 2 CPS reports I've gotten, that they are what I would consider thorough. I don't want to criticize them because you know and I know they are completely I'm not even sure anybody said to them, this is the issue before that I need investigated, from the court. I don't know why that relationship was never dealt with in the report, but it wasn't. So it came back saying these children could be safely maintained in mother's home. I went through my report, my findings, I went through what they had said to me, I went through everything that I had, and I said I disagree with the CPS report. I do not find that these kids can be safely maintained in their mother's home. That's when I came back, and she moved the son with the daughters to dad. I came back here and talked to the son afterwards, and he was like, I told you, he was like shocked about what I didn't tell him everything his mom had said in court, but just one statement. He was shocked at what she had said. And he said, he didn't come out and say, but he said it was a lie. And so I find it sometimes not overwhelming, but I find it a heavy burden to carry my report against something CPS might make a finding on, even though they did say inconclusive, therefore safely maintained. Anyway, so no, you don't rely completely on what other people say. As minors counsel, you have to rely on what your kids say, collateral say, but you have to be really careful. Like if somebody says to you, that's a lie, I have cameras in my home, you have to follow up. I mean, there's so much in determining what's in the best interest of kids in this day and age, it's almost overwhelming, unless you have what's considered a simple case. And we're not usually on simple cases. Yeah. We're only appointed on generally the most awful cases.
It seems if you have an inconclusive, though, I mean, you're definitely got an uphill battle. It's almost dead in the water.
Well, I didn't. I didn't feel like it was dead in the water because I had actually one of the girls gave me a audio recording that had gone on between adult daughter and one of my kids when they discovered it had happened to the other, and I had some information that CPS didn't have, but I was very, very disappointed in their investigation with my kids, what they asked about.
And the other thing, Michael, is this. If we represent kids, and I heard your comment about it's almost, on a couple of occasions you felt like you had egg on your face or you had the wrong conclusion. That's not my job. My job is to investigate whether or not these things are true. Mm-hmm. If they're true, they're true. If they're not, they're not. I'm not going to be the one to say, I know there's been abuse. I'm going to go to a court. By the way, I know my sister worked for CPS. I mean, really. You're not going to you may not ever see a report from them. Am I going to rely upon that? Probably not. The first part, if the client comes to me, I'm going to weigh the credibility of that kid. Mm-hmm. Okay? You can look at kids. I've been around kids for a long time. Okay? You can look at that kid and tell if they're making stuff up because they want to help mom in her fight against dad, or if they're really, really talking from their hearts. Mm-hmm. And that only comes with age and experience. I'm 72 years old, dude. I have seen it all my life. I can look at a case and go, this kid has some credibility. I think I'm going to move forward.
And I can do that in 5 minutes sometimes, you know.
Maybe I'll go in on an ex parte. Maybe I'll ask for 3118. Maybe I'll do something, but I'm not going to just let those allegations sit. And by the way, I don't believe in my cases that I have a dog in this fight. That's not my goal here. My goal is to find out if these allegations are true, and if they are, these kids can't be in that environment. Mm-hmm. So I will take it to that place, no matter what. Mm-hmm. And if it turns out that it's untrue, then it's untrue. And there are cases and the statutes, I haven't seen it lately, and I assume it's still in place. If you make an allegation as a parent in a family law case about sexual abuse and it's unfounded, untrue, then there are some ramifications to you as a parent,
Yeah.
right? And so
Knowingly
right.
untrue. is
And
the
so,
way-
so you look at the motivations of people. Is it mom centered? Is it dad centered? Is it the kid trying to get out of a visit? I mean, I told you about the shaking off pee story, and I've had others. The dad who gave the kid a back rub, and they tried to sexualize it and turn it into something that it wasn't. So I think we have an obligation to fully investigate. I can't answer the question. We're going to have collateral information. We're going to have interviews. We're going to
Exactly.
have professionals to get involved, and somebody's going to make a recommendation that a judge is either going to
You
accept or
have
not.
more?
No, one last thing.
Okay.
Okay.
Carol's gonna finish up real
One
quickly.
last thing about interviewing is, I think it's helpful, I do it, I'm sure that you guys do it as well. Just ask the child, is there anything else you want me to know? Anything else that you want to share with me? And thank the child for being there. Thank them for coming in and talking to you. They love that. I'm really glad you were here. Thank you for coming to see me. So that's,
And I always end up with something like, my first time, boy, it's really cool, I've got another kid now,
kids,
if
kids
you
love
wanna-
to be valued.
Yeah, if you wanna look at my handout that starts kids, what are they trying to tell you, or what are they trying to hide?
Which one is that?
We'll go through,
Did you hand
kids.
that
The
out?
big one.
It's out in the,
Oh,
Come on.
David can get them.
oh, thank you.
So this is just some of my notes I went through when I was figuring out what I wanted to talk about. Where do you start? Get to know as much about the child as possible before the first meeting. So where can we do that? We can look at the court file. We can have a meeting with the parents first if you want. You can talk to, if you know anything about the case and you've got documents, and sometimes I never get them from the attorneys in the case, but if you've got documents to talk about grandma, grandpa, you can even call the collaterals. You can ask caregivers, siblings, and more. Sometimes when I have a couple of kids in a family, I'll bring all the kids in with a parent, and then I'll have everybody go out and I'll talk to one child at a time, and I'll ask them about their siblings. How's your dad, how's your brother doing with mom? How's your brother doing in school? How's your brother doing with dad? And I go through and I get a little information about my kids through some other people, maybe before I have my actual first interview meeting with that child. But the court file is, even if I look at a case print, sometimes it's really interesting where it'll show one parent has gone back to court over and over and over and over and over and over and over. I have a case right now where I'm minors counsel, and I will tell you the attorneys in the case are far more problem than the parents. And they just, and both parents have told me, I'm trying to work with the other side, but my attorney tells me blah, 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 blah. So, you can get information from the attorney, the two attorneys in the case, and sometimes, you've got to figure out what's really going on, because when you talk to the attorneys and then you talk to the parents and you interview the child with mom and with dad, you may get a really different story than you get from the two attorneys in the case. Okay, so what's relevant, and we will talk a little bit about this. The child's age, we're going to talk about ages and stages a little bit. So let me just ask you, Jennifer, what's relevant about a child's age for minors counsel?
Well, the way they process things, the way they understand things, the way they're influenced, and the things that they want in their own agenda frequently.
Do you think that a child who has lived with one parent comfortably and maybe had a little alienation started when they're young, let's say they're 3, do you think they might report that that's where they want to be, where they need to be, where they should be, if you even go that direction? Or they may even by the age of 3 start to cover up for one parent? Do you think that's possible?
Absolutely.
Okay, so even young. I have seen 3-year-olds do that. All right, culture. It was really interesting. I think it was 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, Patricia Muro did a really, really good job on Minors Council talking about Latino culture and how Minors Council might be a little bit different in that particular culture. And I have had cases where I've actually gone to mobile home parks in, I don't even remember where now, Mecca or somewhere. And you know, my kids didn't open up when they were in my office. But when I went to their mobile home, they said, I need to show you this. And they showed me the hole that Dad had kicked in their bedroom door. And I said, where did that come from? My dad comes home drunk most nights, and he tries to pull me down the hall by my hair, or my mom, and we run in this room and we lock the door because it's the only door that has a lock. They showed me the lock. They showed me the hole, and I did write a report, and I have talked about this in other minors council classes. And when that dad came to meet me in my office, he actually walked around behind my desk, put his arm around me, and he said, I am such a good father. I hope you report that. He did. You know, no other dad probably in any of my minors council cases in 20 years has ever done that.
Excuse me.
Yeah, but you know, the things that you find out from kids by going to their homes, and I actually had a minors council case where Dad and Mom were from Bangladesh. I had it in San Bernardino, and the dad was extremely controlling. And when we left court, and the judge followed my recommendation and left the children with Mom, and there were significant reasons, very significant reasons. He followed me out of court, yelling at me out in the grass, evil woman, evil woman, evil woman, all the way to my car. So you never know what culture is going to bring into a case for minors council. That father's attorney told me he does not like being confronted or made to look like a fool. I didn't try to make him look like a fool. I never do that. But because of culture, you need to be very, very, very sensitive about how somebody from Bangladesh would take any recommendation that makes them feel foolish, rather than somebody who's, you know, American or redneck or whatever. It's like, you can say anything about me you want, I don't care. So when you deal with different cultures, you need to do a little background check, find out a little bit about their culture, and find out the best way to converse with them, because it will be very different from culture to culture. I have learned that. I've probably had a dozen cases with, you know, foreign background parents, and I've enjoyed all of them, actually. I mean, I don't enjoy being called evil woman, but you know, I really liked the dad and I really liked the mom, and I don't think I've had any cases where I didn't find good things about both parents. But you have to make a decision about what's in the best interest of your kids, and the parents are not always going to like it, and they're going to take it the way they're going to take it.
Can I throw out a very quick I have had a lot of clients from the Middle East, from Iran, Syria, born there, immigrated here, as well as other countries. And one of the techniques, because I know it's fairly patriarchal, is one of the things that I've tried, and it seems to help break the ice, is when I introduce and I say, well, tell me a little bit about your background. What kind of family did you grow up in? And a lot of times they come from very wealthy families. Now, I'm generalizing, not always, but the very fact that they left their country, left everything, came here, especially as a young adult, it's a family with means. And I will say to them, and usually it's very, very true, and I mean it sincerely, you have a very, very rich culture in your country, don't you? You have a very close, and especially with a lot of Hispanic families, what I learned, and I see, tell me, you have, your family is very important to you, isn't it? Especially to the parents. And immediately, especially in the climate that we're in now, not climate, but political climate, emotional climate, validating someone who already feels like an outsider or the other person or them is I have great admiration for your culture. Tell me more about it. What are some things that I could learn about you? And immediately, and it breaks the ice, almost always,
Yes.
because you're not seen as the enemy or judging, you're seen as kind of an ally. Now, I still go back to no, in our country, no, you don't get to beat your child with a broomstick and draw blood, and that's not okay. But in their, I'm not saying in their country it is, but, you
Or
say-
your wife.
or your wife, or
In
your
front of the
children,
kids.
or kick the dogs,
Or prevent your girls from going to school in 6th grade.
yeah.
Or
Yeah.
those other things. that-
Yeah.
But by just, I
There are-
call it the stroke, just by giving them that emotional stroke that I don't know too much about it. I do know a lot about the Middle East because I lived there for a few years, but I don't know everything. And I don't know about this family. So sometimes that, yeah, I think by opening it up and telling me more. What do I need to know about your culture that would be helpful for me?
Really
Oh.
good, really good. What else is relevant? I've got domestic violence in my list. It's interesting, here, I think the courts generally grant sole legal, sole physical custody to mom when, if dad has a restraining order against him, vice versa. But I will tell you, I don't find that in Riverside, and I don't find that in San Bernardino counties, and I don't find it where I've had other cases. They generally will issue joint legal custody. And, it depends on the judge specifically, but in general. And I went back looking at my family law journals, and about 2021, there was a big article about why custodial parents shouldn't share, actually non-custodial parent and custodial parent shouldn't share joint legal custody, because when one parent is decidedly either a perpetrator of stalking maybe, or actual, violence of some kind, you shouldn't have to, the custodial parent shouldn't have to get permission from that parent before they can do anything for the child. And it is a huge issue. I find it to be a huge issue. Back when I was a new attorney, you just had to consult about taking a child to the doctor. Now the rule says must agree. And it's a very, very big issue when you have one hostile parent and one abusive parent. And I think it's good that here, at least for that year, that the restraining order is in effect until somebody, rebuts the presumption. I think it's a good thing until that cooling off period goes by, that one parent might only have the legal custody.
And it goes even further than that. I've been practicing law since the 80s. And back in the 80s is when judges decided in the legislature that we should have joint legal custody. Because they never had that before, not on a consistent basis. Mostly moms had legal custody. And so they thought that the way to solve the problem is to impose joint legal custody. Outside of the stuff that we're learning, it's problematic in most cases.
Well,
Because
the consent particularly.
well, not even
No, the
just the
agreement.
consent. I mean,
Yeah,
I mean,
consent
back
was-
then you didn't have to have consent.
Right.
But what they did was they just put this blanket rule down that everybody had joint legal custody, and not necessarily physical, but now we've got issues with picking the doctor, changing the doctor, what schools. I mean, we spent so much time in court on legal custody issues. And I can't tell you how many judges over the years I've said, you know what, I know what the legislature says, but here's the problem. So some judges will carve out exceptions. I've had one where the husband was not making sound medical decisions, so mom got sole legal only as it related to medical. So judges have been able to parse those things out, and you can always suggest that, especially if it's problematic. But then you get to these kinds of cases where we're acting as minors counsel, it becomes DV, control.
The
Nope.
confer process is weaponized.
Nope, they're not going to that school.
Yeah.
I have a case right now where the dad is very difficult, and I appeared at an IEP meeting by telephone, and of course I announced my appearance when I got on the phone. He was late, and so when he showed up, I was listening. It was a major appointment. I assumed everybody knew I was. He had no idea when I open my mouth and said something, he goes, "What is she doing on this phone? I am aborting this conversation right. This is never going to happen, and I'm not doing anything, and I'm going to tell my lawyer that she's on the phone." And I said, "Well, I gave you my orders from the court. I am minors counsel, and I'm allowed to be here unless somebody's going to throw me off. So I'm staying." He is livid, and there's another meeting coming up next week. One of your cases, and I'm going to be on that phone. Absolutely. Give me an order that says I can't. I don't care. I'm doing it. So
Okay.
it's just fraught with all kinds of
The
issues.
court wants you there.
I'm going to be there.
So, those are the kind of things that we also need to look at as minors counsel. Why might one parent be causing grief for this child related to school, related to, medical care, related to dental care, related to who knows what? It's a real issue if we have a real domestic violence perpetrator that we have to deal with when they are so angry with the other parent that the child is affected. So, just having a restraining order in a case doesn't affect my thoughts until I see that the restraining order is only sort of covering the, his or her boiling point, and there are still issues boiling underneath that are affecting the kid I've been appointed to represent. All right, family history. This is another one I have as relevant, family history. There are cases out there, and I don't want to talk about too specific, but there are cases out there where we might be appointed where there are three parents. And why do we have three parents? Because somebody cheated, or somebody didn't, or somebody purposely wanted three parents. There are all kinds of issues related to that. And I have been appointed on cases like that, and I've been appointed on cases where a grandparent had custody and was very angry when I didn't agree that custody should remain with grandparent, because I went through all the factors and found the parents had made all of the corrections they had to make in their lives. So when I say what's relevant, the family history is very relevant. Let's talk about the grandparents in that case. What is the grandparents' relationship to the mother? What is the grandparents' relationship to the father? What is the grandparents' relationship to the children? And I think probably all grandparents love their grandkids. I don't know. But you can't treat a grandchild as a possession, that I've got something the mom wants. And so the family history is really important. When you bring kids into interview, one of the things you need to find out is, who else lives around here? Do you see your grandma? Do you see your grandpa? Do you have cousins here? What do you do on the weekends? It's really kind of important to find out who's involved in the child's life, and why are they involved in the child's life, and how are they involved in the child's life, and how often are they involved. I think that looking at the overall family is extremely important. I had a case one time where I was in the case, and Patricia Murdo got involved with another child, same parents. She was the minors counsel. But earlier in the case with the older child, grandma and mom had come out and screamed at the child getting into my client's car. I wasn't minors counsel. "He's the devil, you'll go to hell if you go with him." And the child fell down on the ground. It had to be 5150. So when you look at family history, you do have to look and see who else is involved in, I don't want to say the chaos of custody, but sometimes it is. Who else is involved in issues relating to your child, you're the one your court appointed to represent.
And I think we're seeing more and more, thank you, more and more, I appreciate that, thank you. More and more families that are moving back in with their parents. Part of it's financial, part of it is again cultural, part of it may be related to a separation and or divorce, or at least some kind of separation, and so financially they can't go get their own apartment or condo or house to raise the kids when there's less money coming in. And so, and these are parents, I have some parents that work very, very far away. They don't come home until 7 o'clock at night, which is understandable. And so grandma and grandpa play an integral part in the children's lives. Some cases it's wonderful, some cases it's not wonderful, but again, it's ripe for, well, because that grandparent, if they have an axe to grind about the other parent who's no longer in the home, well, and they have massive influence, especially on younger children,
Absolutely.
whether it's subtle or whether it's overt.
I just want to go on. There are more, of course, relevant issues. I'm sorry, I have to text my husband to pick up something because we're going to get out a little bit late. There are a few other things that are very, very relevant. I didn't list them all here. Does anybody else have an idea that you must consider something as very relevant when you're addressing a case?
Concerning the characteristics of the child?
Well, what do you consider relevant to the case when you're minors counsel?
The established status quo, the norms for the child, I would think, in terms of their living situation, their school and education, their neighborhood, their friends.
Absolutely, all of that. So you're looking at the entire life of the child right there.
Mhm.
Okay, I think, of course, we have to do that. That's good. We have a lot to cover. We've got about 25 minutes left max. And I do want to cut off a little bit early. You know, we'll cut out before this is a 2 full hours because we didn't take a break. But when you're interviewing a child, if you want to look down to my next paragraph, the basics of communicating with your client. The very first thing you need to address is the comfort level of the child. And I'm not going to repeat everything that Carole said. I just have some crossovers with her. As I said, I've got my stuffed animals up there, and I've learned over the years you really have to observe the very first appointment, because I've had some really bizarre first appointments with parents and kids. I actually I tried to interview a child because mom wanted to meet at a restaurant. So I met at a restaurant in Palm Springs. Every time I tried to talk to the kid, mom would get between us, even if she had to lean this far. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not exaggerating. Another case that I had, my guardian angel case, where my 3 kids were being sexually molested by dad. This is what's come out in the case. I'm not saying it happened, but it's what the judge determined and did come out in the forensics. Every time I tried to talk to him, he had a kid on his knees, and she was probably at the time about 10. Every time I tried to talk to him, and we were having a family meeting. So sometimes I have a family meeting to start. We were having a family meeting, and every time I tried to talk to him and ask him a question, he moved his daughter in front of his face. Physically moved her body so I could not see him. You will see bizarre things like that happen, and you will have to figure out why. And you know, it just made me curious to figure out what else was going on here. Why was mom not wanting me to communicate with her son? Why was dad not wanting to be open enough with me to let me see him while he's talking to me? So those are really important things. You will see body language of parents to die for. I mean, like I was telling you earlier when Carole was speaking, every time the child said he didn't want to go to dad's.
Good boy, good boy.
Good boy,
Well, let me
good
give
boy.
you a treat.
Yeah, and you'll see body language where I'll bring the parents in and kids in, and mom's body language about dad is so negative. Her foot will point the other way. She'll turn her body away from him. She'll look this way. And the dad will be looking like, ah, you know. And after I let the kids go, after a family meeting like that, I will sit here and I will very kindly point that out to the parents. Do you know what you were telling your kids while you were in here? I didn't say anything. Well, let me just tell you what you were telling them. And I show them, I repeat what I saw as their body language. And sometimes it's just rolling the eyes when the other parent is talking. Sometimes it's facing away, turning your foot, the other way, fidgeting when the other person is talking, all kinds of stuff. It's easy to look up what body language means, and I think you probably all are experts on reading body language.
I was in a mediation one time, and we're all sitting at a conference table, as we are. I had the husband, and the wife was sitting on the other side with her lawyer, and she got up, turned her chair around, and sat facing that way in front of the mediator.
I wonder what that means.
Do you want to hear something really funny? This has nothing to do with minors counsel. We were in a trial in
Crazy.
juvenile court one time because somebody sued us. I mean, they lost. But before the trial was over, the plaintiff turned her chair around and put her back to the judge. It was so funny, right in front of the jury. I mean,
I think they're trying to
really.
give you a message here.
It's federal
Yeah,
court.
federal
That
court.
what did I say?
Juvenile.
Oh, I'm sorry, not juvenile court.
Okay,
Federal
maybe
court.
juvenile.
Somebody sued us and took us to federal court one time. It was actually the funniest, probably, day or two of my life.
Well, not at the time, I'm sure.
No, it was. I couldn't help but laugh the whole. I mean, really, when you see somebody do that, you couldn't help but laugh, and the whole thing went like that for her.
What I notice is that wherever someone sits the very first time they come in, so I have a love seat and a couch
Yes.
and a chair and then my chair. Wherever they sit the first time they come in, that's where they will always sit forever,
Absolutely.
forever.
Yeah.
Really?
Mhm.
Wow.
That's a
I
good
don't point it out
observation.
because I don't want them to feel uncomfortable. But
Okay, interviewing my child. I work hard to establish a relationship the very first meeting. And I have had success in 100% of my cases except one, where mother sent in a recorder and son recorded our whole meeting.
Yeah.
And he was angry when he walked out, and her attorney reported our entire meeting in a court document. And the judge said, "What would you like to do about that, Miss Adams?" And it's like, not hurting me. I'm happy to leave it, but I could report him to the bar if I chose to. I mean, and that kid remained angry, and I seriously didn't have him come back because mother was so out of control. I couldn't have her in my office. Other than that, I have had a great relationship with every minor I've represented. I know that. I'm still in touch with them. They text me, "Can the skull go through my locker?" And I have kids call me that I represented 15, 20 years ago, not just my guardian angel kids, but I'm still in contact with probably at least 2/3 of my kids. I follow up when they graduate from high school. I follow up when they are graduating from, whatever. I call the parents, I call them. I have one child who grew up to be an adult, transitioned from female to male, talked to him maybe 2 weeks ago. He's engaged and moving back to his home state. And so happy to talk to me. And I just love that kid from when the minute I met her until, I talk to him now. And he is an adorable, adorable young person, now 23 years old. And I just love him.
so you form relationships
Yeah.
very
Yes.
strongly with these kids.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, one of the things you need to be careful of when you are speaking to your kids, and I have handouts talking about ages and stages, and we're unfortunately growing short of time, but I have handouts about communicating with young children, communicating with teens. But one of the things you need to do at your first meeting and your subsequent meetings, and this may go back to culture a little bit too, watch the tempo of your talk. Make sure your kids are understanding you. And sometimes I have a hard time understanding my kids at first because they will sit there and they will talk like this, and I'm not sure I'm hearing every word. I don't know if any of you have had that, but especially the little boy with the two older sisters. First couple of meetings I had with him, I could hardly understand him when he was telling me he wanted to stay with mom because he was talking so quietly. So watch the tempo and the clarity of your conversation. It has to be age appropriate. So if you've got a teenager, Carole was right on. You talk about what they like in this day and age, and they'll ask me, do I know anything about, I can't remember the name of it, something you do on your computer.
Coding?
Coding. Yeah, do you know about coding, Miss Adam? No, tell me about coding. And we have those conversations before when I ask them, what do you really like to do? What do you like? And this kid, this little boy, are you involved in any sports? No, but I'd like to play soccer. Well, why aren't you playing soccer? I can't, but now he can. So when you're talking with your kid, make sure you're talking at their tempo and that you're clear and that you're getting their answers clear. You might have to ask, could you tell me that again? I have to do that. Could you tell me that again? I didn't quite hear that. The next thing I put on here was body language and personal space. Body language I've already talked about. Personal space. I've actually had a couple of parents who wanted to get right in my face when they were talking to me. And I've had kids who wanted to come over and hug me while they were talking to me. And I've had kids who wanted to, stay in the chair, which is in front of my desk. But I will frequently come and sit in the chair next to the chair they're in. And when I met these 3 kids that I became their guardian angel, after we had this big family meeting and I had the parents leave, this is the one where dad was hiding behind daughter, I had the parents leave the room. I actually put a blanket down on the floor. That was back when I could get up from the floor. And the 3 kids and I sat on the floor and talked for quite a while. That was a very interesting case, and you were asking about where do you investigate. I was so concerned about that case. Dad had taken the kids and gone to Northern California. I actually, out of the blue, called CPS in that county. And the guy who answered said, I don't know why you called me and I'm not allowed to talk to you, but I want you to know a report just came in from a general public person that they saw Dad hit the son in the side of the head so hard the kid's ear was bleeding in the grocery store. So I'm talking out of, order right now, but sometimes you just have to follow your gut and you have to figure out who in the world could I talk to about this, and you just have to make the call. And anyway, that's a little bit out of order, but personal space, a lot of kids want to move their chair right over next to you and talk to you. I generally start out by my desk, and I have these chairs here, and I have these rolling chairs for a purpose, and sometimes I'll roll over with the kids, and we'll talk, and sometimes they'll want to roll around my room and all kinds of stuff. But when I go to their homes, I always have them show me their room. And like I was saying about Don Griffith's case that time where Mom had just moved him into his own room. She'd been sleeping with him until then. And he was, 6 years old maybe? I can't remember. But she'd been ordered not to be sleeping with that kid. And Don was minors counsel and found out she was going to lunch with him every day at school and had just made up his own new room that day. So I try to work at eye level with the kids if possible, and not always, because frequently while I'm letting the kids get used to me, I'm behind my desk and I'm letting them sit in whatever chair they want and move it around wherever they want. But I generally find that talking at eye level with kids works the best. Might be at the second meeting and on. And I started to say when I go to their home, I have them show me their bedroom, but I have them show me anything they want. Like one kid took me out to see their chickens in the backyard and their roosters, and somebody had a pig one time when I went there. So, you need to learn about your kids no matter what's important in their lives. You've already covered questions must be open-ended, never leading. Is it true that your mom really does da 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 da? Don't ask leading questions. You said you can ask closed questions like how old are you?
Yeah.
That's fine.
If you want a direct answer.
Right. I had never put down never closed, but there are some answers you may want, as Carole talked about. And then I asked the kids, and you may have said this too, do you know what truth is? And do you know what is true and what's not true? And I think you talked about that already.
It's okay.
And then I put down what you observe rather than what you hear. When you get good at this, you should be able to detect fear in your client. You should be able to detect suspicion. If your little kid is suspicious, if they're panicked, and I had one girl come in here and she was panicked. And she's now not living with her mother, she's not living with her father, she's living with an uncle. But she sat in my office and she got hysterical. And after the first meeting, when she was hysterical, I talked to her on the phone. She had gone to somewhere with her dad. She was hysterical with her dad. I got on the phone with her. She's now doing very, very well in therapy, but away from her mother's home, where there was a big problem. If you're getting unusual responses from your child that you're talking to, you got to figure out why. You know, why when I'm asking about what happened on Sunday, are they telling me what happened a year ago? They may have no time frame yet if they're too young, but you know, if they're older and a teenager, they should not be avoiding your questions. So if somebody's avoiding what you're asking, you need to, you know, figure out a way to get around that avoidance.
Can I insert something?
Absolutely.
It's in my other handout.
Absolutely.
But with younger children, especially, not so much in middle school or high school, of course, but in the younger kids, even pre-K and kindergarten and first grade, they don't have a good sense of time. And so what I often do is, so did that happen in the summer when it was really hot, especially living here, because they can discern that? Or was it during Christmas, or, you know, or was it at another time? Or I don't want to make it too convoluted for them. Or was this when you were 5, like this year, or did it happen before you were 5? So I use markers, Christmas time, summer, was it around your birthday? They usually know before and after by that age. So again, having some kind of a, because they're not really accurate when it comes to, well, I think it happened 3 Sundays ago.
I still need a marker to determine when
I
things
still need a
happen.
marker, yeah, yeah. Well, it happened a long time ago. Oh, when was that? Well, last week.
It's
Or
true,
yeah.
it's true, they will say that.
Christmas is always a good one.
Yeah.
For adults too. That's it.
Yeah.
Because it's like, was it 1 Christmas ago, 2? That's like one of those things that people seem to remember, and it can help pin down a time frame more than anything else I've experienced. So.
I definitely am not good with time unless I have a marker. I've learned that. Okay, this is sort of about what Sheila talked about earlier. Do you detect pressure or influence on your child when you're first meeting with the kid, or even later? I mean, what do you look for? And we talked very briefly about this. I look for failure to maintain eye contact, and you know, maybe even not wanting me to see their face when they're talking to me or whatever. Kids they think they can tell you something by not saying anything, but if you've done this a long time, you can read what they're saying when they're not saying anything. Squirming when they're discussing specific topics, and we talked about that when you were talking about your alienation this morning. I've noticed that some kids, when they get really uncomfortable about something, they'll change their speech. They'll either start talking really fast, or they'll start talking really slowly, or they'll start talking so quietly you can't hear them, or whatever. So when you detect a change in the conversation, you know, the way you just start conversing, what brought that about? Oh, that was my question about so and so and so, or that was my statement about, or that was. So you want to look at what brought about the change, and then find a different way to have the child discuss it, if they will today. And if they won't, I make a note on my notes and I bring it up next time. Like you say, well, that's not what I remembered last time. I don't do that. I don't give them a hint about what I made a note about the first time. But I do make notes that this is a very big change from my first discussion with my child. I type notes every single meeting about what each kid and each parent says and what I observe. It's also very interesting when a child will sit here and repeat over and over and over and over the same words, the same sentence, the same sentence, the same sentence. My dad touched me. My dad touched me. My dad touched me. My dad touched me. I know he touched me. My dad touched me. And if you ask them to explain, like Carole said, you can even ask them, what does that mean? And honestly, sometimes they don't know. Isn't that what you find?
That's a big indicator that they've
Yeah,
been coached
yeah, big indicator.
by someone.
Yeah. So one time I had a case that was so confusing, and we've discussed this in the past. She was about maybe 5. I don't think she was 6 yet. She kept telling her mother that Dad was touching her. And Dad was completely like, I can't believe she's saying that. And it went on, and nobody could get to the bottom of it. I don't even remember if CPS was involved or not, but here's what I did. I called Diana Harrington and I said, I need a meeting in your office with my client and both parents. And I've done this on a few cases now. And we went in and I explained to the child, but Diana Harrington explained, this is a no lies here meeting. So she asked one question. What do you mean? Well, she asked the first question. What do you mean by my dad touched me? The kid looked like, and I don't know. Well, why are you telling people that? My grandma told me to say it. Mom's mom was telling her to say that. Mother didn't know. Mother was not in on it. Mother was believing her. She had no idea what was going on. Dad had no idea what was going on, and Mom was shocked to find out her mother was the one telling this child to say it. So you have to become inventive when you figure out what's really happening, because I really believe the mom and I really believe the dad that neither one of them knew why this child was saying it, if it was true. And I had a no lies meeting again later with a really awful case, and the child was older, probably 11, and came to the meeting and saw her dad there and just got hysterical. Couldn't even come into the room at Diana's office. And I had to take her out, and we knew exactly what had happened, each parent was saying, mother and father is doing this, and it was awful. And anyway, I had to take her out, and she told me then what happened, what was going on. So we are seriously about out of time. We have about 3 or 4 minutes for questions, but what I'd like you to look at is, I have a couple of handouts. One of them is on anxiety and fear in children, and it's kind of what I'm talking about right now. It's a really good reason to go to a third party and figure out what's going on, or don't be afraid to call Carole Bayer, don't be afraid to call Diana Harrington, don't be afraid to call, somebody who's an expert, and get their advice about, what do you think about this and what might I do about it? Minors Council, we're not therapists, and we don't see every aspect of what's going on, and that's why I have involved Miss Harrington occasionally, and it's why I have called Miss Bayer occasionally. And I want you to look at, let's look, my secretary put them upside down. The last few pages of my kids, what are they trying to tell you, or what are they trying to hide? These last pages are upside down, but these are actually text messages that were sent from a mother in a case to a teenage daughter in a case. Your mother's been kidnapped and is being held, or something like that. You can read it. It's really kind of ugly. I found her, I'm gonna have to take her to hospital. Why aren't you taking care of your mother? It's really awful.
Who's that?
That's who sent the text message, allegedly, but it's not. It came from the mother. It all came out. And I shouldn't have the name at the top, but nobody's gonna know this case. It wasn't in this county, and it wasn't around here. But this is where parents will actually go. Yeah, you can take that off of there.
Okay.
This is how far parents will actually go to make their kids afraid to leave a parent, to want to go with the other parent. I have handouts attached to this about home visits, And I actually taught a class to AFCC one time about how do you know if you're hearing the voice of the child. I talked about recognizing influences and disabilities in parent ploys. So a few of the handouts from previous classes that I've taught, and a few other things that I've used, techniques for effective communication. They're similar to Carole's, actually. How to get to know your client. And this is saying how are interviews necessary, sufficient, or reliable? Who should be interviewed, and what do you need to learn? The other thing is that came up a few years ago is when you're writing your minors council report, and I think I might do a short little talk, and maybe you want to help me on writing a minors council report. Because how do you put in there anything that might be hearsay? And that was a big deal about 6 years ago, I guess. Yeah, and I used to actually attach a declaration from anybody I interviewed, so it was under penalty of perjury. I haven't gone that far recently because I haven't interviewed huge collaterals in my latest cases. But it's a good way, you know, just if you interview anybody, attach their declaration under penalty of perjury, so then it's not hearsay in
Well,
the case.
technically
It
is.
could, well, it could be.
Because I don't have the right to cross-examine it, so it is hearsay.
It could be, but
It is
you know,
hearsay.
if it's set for a hearing, you know who they are, you know
Right.
who they set, they can be brought in.
Correct.
So I want to provide in my minors council report anything that I think is relevant and necessary.
And I think that's a good topic, Carol, so we can put a class
I'd
together
like
on
to. I'd like
writing
to.
reports and
Yeah.
Well, there's
things you
also
can say
another,
to it.
there's a major decision that got published in the last year, I think,
Right.
on that topic. I mean, now, because
Right.
there was always that question, or
Could
can
we
you make
recommend?
recommendations
Now we
or
can.
not?
Right.
Now it's clear that you
It
can.
was
Yeah.
a 2023 case.
And
So
Natalie,
thank you.
we're not in the class anymore exactly, but Natalie is going to be covering the law for minors council for us. She's doing
Nice.
an hour. Let me just close with communicating with your kids. Research, teens, babies, adults. I have represented 18-year-olds and I've represented newborns. And it's imperative that you learn how to find out what's going on in each child's life. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, do you want to say anything?
One last thing, I'm not gonna read it, but the handout that I compiled is the characteristics of children's functioning at different stages. It even talks about infancy, since we can't interview them, but it kind of goes through each stage of functioning and typically what their tasks are and ways to communicate with them.
And I
So-
do have an attachment like
Of
that too to
course you
mine.
do.
So,
Yes, I saw that.
so we're good. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.